brothers and our sisters, together we will stand. There is power in our union.
This is the Long Island Fed News with John Durso and Roger Clayman. Our guest today is Ryan Stanton. This is a monthly podcast of the Long Island Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. So, gentlemen, it's good to see everybody. I'm glad everybody's healthy. This has been a very interesting month. We have just concluded the most important election of our lifetime. I know we've always heard that from time to time, but for those of us in labor, this truly has been the most important election of our lifetime. And I know we'll get into it a little bit, but some of the things that we need to do now as the labor movement coming together, getting our elected officials to understand the importance of protecting the rights of working men and women are absolute paramount. It's important for our economy. It's important for our environment. It's important for the working men and women of this country who need to go back to work, and those who are working to be safe, to work in a safe environment. So, Roger, let me turn to you, my friend.
Well, most of us, John, have never lived through a pandemic. And so we were in very unusual times. We had a pandemic, a major healthcare crisis. We were going through major racial unrest throughout the country. We were living through the results of this pandemic, which was an economic crisis. And so all these things had to be addressed and really came out, I think, as issues in the election. And I think that the failure of the Trump administration to address most of them are major factors in why he didn't win the election, why Joe Biden was successful. But we were talking about major questions like how to keep frontline workers safe, as you said. We were looking for an OSHA standard to say what should be the safety protocols that existed in all of our workplaces. We were trying to keep workers employed, and those who were not, to try to get them unemployment insurance. And we were meeting hostility at every turn from the administration. We were trying to help small business, and that was part of a package that got passed. But as it began to run out, that was a major problem. And the same was true of state and local government and people's health insurance, and then the need to try to re-stimulate the economy with infrastructure. And on all these issues, this administration, the Trump administration, was silent. But, I want to turn to Ryan, though, and just say, well, we these were the major national issues, but how did we do here on Long Island? How did we fare in this election?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Roger, and good morning, guys. A month ago, we were here talking about some of the most important races on Long Island, what we were focused on as a labor movement. And we were rather fortunate that we were largely successful in this cycle's election when it comes to supporting candidates and electing candidates that support the issues and the causes you just talked about. Specifically, we supported the New York State Senate Democratic majority because they've been advocates for us in advocating policies that benefit workers, unemployment insurance, different policies that are going to protect people in the workplace. And so 5 of the 6 incumbents in that majority were reelected. Some of the more hotly contested races were Kevin Thomas and Senator Jim Gorin. Some people called Kevin the accidental senator just 2 years ago, but he spent 2 years advocating and fighting for working people, and so working people stood behind him and helped him coast to a pretty solid reelection. And on election night, folks weren't so sure that was going to be the case. We've heard the term the red mirage. The reality is Democratic voters voted by mail by far greater numbers than independents and unaffiliated voters, and so as the votes were counted in total, Kevin was reelected, and the same is true of Senator Jim Gorin. Switching gears to the New York State Assembly, we have some staunch supporters in Steve Stern and Assemblyman Steve Engelbright, some of the more senior members or seasoned veteran legislators. And on election night, it was unclear whether or not they'd be sent back to the People's Chamber in the New York State Assembly. And ultimately, again, when the votes were counted, they were successful. On the congressional level, we have a split delegation between the Democratic and Republican parties, and ultimately we have a really strong supporter of the labor movement in Tom Suozzi. He was reelected handily, and again, this year being very unique in the way voters voted, that was unclear on election night, but Tom ultimately pulled way ahead in the final vote count. And in the 2nd Congressional District, we talked about Jackie Gordon, a candidate that was a union member herself, had earned our support. But we're looking forward to giving Andrew Garbarino, the candidate that was successful in that election, an opportunity to earn our support in the future. So we were not successful in supporting Jackie there. But Assemblyman Garbarino and Congressman-elect Garbarino will have an opportunity to demonstrate why maybe we should consider supporting them in the future. So that's just sort of an overview of all three levels and houses.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I mean, that's a lot of people, a lot of candidates that we cared about. A lot of work went into it in a very unusual environment.
Yeah, and it was an unusual environment. And, just a couple of quick comments on this election. We talked about the fact that we have a split congressional delegation, and we're hopeful that Congressman-elect Garbarino and the current Congressman Lee Zeldin will take up the fight to get us back our SALT deductions. These are absolutely critical to our region. Now, Garbarino has not had the opportunity to vote on that, but Zeldin did and did not support us. So we're hopeful that the influence of Suozzi, the influence of Garbarino, will wake him up to the fact that his constituents, the people on Long Island, need those deductions back. And 2 years rolls around real quick. And if he's going to want support from us, he has to help us. And we're also fortunate in the fact that Congressman Greg Meeks, who has a small part of Long Island, just received a very prestigious chairmanship, and he has become a much more influential member of the congressional leadership. So that will, of course, help us.
Yeah, and there was another candidate that we supported that is not on the national picture yet, but it's your son, Michael, who I've known for some time, not really well. I got to know a lot of things about him in the course of this election that just impressed me so much with what a gentleman he is and what a nice guy. And I'm just curious, John, how you felt about having your son as a candidate and what it meant to you to see him succeed.
Well, thanks for mentioning that. And it's funny because you said you got to know him better under this in this run. Actually, I've got to know him and understand him better in this run as well. But of course, I'm very, very proud of him. And you said he's a nice guy, and I think that's true. And it's he took after his mother did a great job with him. But here's a young man who spent 10 years on the back of a sanitation truck in the town of Oyster Bay, works in security at Hofstra, besides working in sanitation as a sanitation inspector for the town, and then runs for the assembly. So, of course, I'm very proud of him. And his mother and his grandparents, I know, are looking down on him from heaven and are proud. And we are all very, very proud of him. And I expect him that he will do a good job. And he's a strong union man. So I'm very happy about that.
And he knows that he can come to us to help him learn these issues, that some of which will be new to him. But I'm very confident that we'll have a great voice in Albany because he's there. So I wanted to say a few words about the union vote. It's much analyzed. And after the 2016 election, I went on this self-appointed speaking tour, really kind of asked by the Huntington Democratic Town Committee to talk about what's wrong with the white union member. Why are they not voting the way we think that they should vote? And so it made me think a little bit and put some things together. But, it's interesting that we haven't fully analyzed 2020 yet because it's too soon. But there's some big similarities. But the first thing we know is that union members went for Biden 58% in total. While the general public gave him a margin of 3 points, union gave him 21 points. So clearly the union members received the message, or could think about it in a different way. But 95% of workers in this election said that workers' rights is going to be their top priority in the next Congress. And that includes 93% of those who voted for Trump, who are union members. They believe in workers' rights. So after the 2016 election, we found that the white working class supported Trump by a 39% margin. We found that half of non-college educated whites identified themselves as conservatives, but 35% of that group really identified as having moderate views. And while Trump won that conservative group, because we can't change him, by 85%, he only won the moderates by 26%. So what the conclusion of the people who studied was that the moderates won't necessarily reject progressive economic policy, but they have a negative view of government. And there's an evidence that continued this year in this election, and in fact may have even spread into working class people in minority communities who may feel somehow their needs are not being taken care of. So I think what we have to do is we have to be very careful about this idea about non-college educated, as if people who haven't been to college but are working class people can't think about these issues.
I didn't go to college.
And you think pretty good.
I like to think I do.
Most of the time.
But one thing that working people could see, it doesn't take a lot of education, they could see the deindustrialization of America. They could see inequality. It's there for everyone to see. They could see Republican policy of austerity, the refusal to invest in America. They could see a system that's rigged by gerrymander and by Citizens United. And they could see that we were deunionized. So I think that the conclusion we have is that where unions speak to their members, it makes a big difference. Where we are no longer able to speak because we lost so many members in the heartland because of deindustrialization, it's replaced by Fox News and by lies. And so what does this mean? I mean, this means that there's a very good case for unionization. The fact that our members support it and support workers' rights, we can make a difference in the outcomes.
Well, I think that you're right. But, one of the things that we've talked about, and we've talked about it for years, is that the Republican Party nationwide is not the Republican Party here on Long Island. So often, Republican leaders, Republican elected officials support us and support our labor movement. Not all. And then we've had the same thing on the Democratic side. I had a membership meeting just last night, and what I talked about is the fact that we are not Republicans, we are not Democrats, we are union people. We fight to support those elected officials who will support our members. On-the-job worker protections, infrastructure dollars that we need in order to put people to work, pension reform, healthcare reform, things that we need that our members have to understand. And that's what they have to look at. And that is the message that we have an opportunity to get across. When people vote, our membership vote, they have to vote their pocketbook, their safety for their families. Not the name Republican or Democrat, but what it is that's going to protect them on the job and at the same time be able to protect them at their homes. So this is the Long Island Federation of Labor News with John Durso, Roger Clayman, and our guest Ryan Stanton, a monthly podcast of the Long Island Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Teaching in this new normal with mask coverings, partitions, and careful interaction is tough.
It's taking a toll on both educators and students.
Focusing on better days to come, we won't forget 2020. We couldn't be prouder of our students.
We don't give our kids enough credit. It was a really tough year on them, too.
That's what makes this holiday season special.
Thank you, kids, for everything. You truly deserve all the joys that the holidays bring.
LongIslandTeachers.org. Teacher leaders in the community.
This is the Long Island Fed News with John Durso and Roger Clayman. Our guest is Ryan Stanton, a monthly podcast of the Long Island Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO. So we've been talking about a number of things that are in the news. And one of the things that is just dominating the news is COVID-19. It is the elephant in the room, for lack of a better word. And, quite frankly, it dominates everything, every opportunity that comes up, everything that goes on. And I'm honored to serve on the Long Island Control Room along with Tracy Edwards of the NAACP, Kevin Law of the Long Island Association, along with the Suffolk County Executive and the Nassau County Executive and their staffs, along with the staffs from the governor's office. And it's a very interesting set of meetings. We meet every day. Sometimes it's for a half hour, sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's 6 days. But it's normally a few days a week. And we talk about the numbers and what's going on. And everything that comes back to us is that the numbers are going up. If you read the newspaper, you pick up the TV, turn on the TV, you pick up any kind of publication, you see that the numbers are going up. And to the governor's credit, he's explained it so well. But it is all self-inflicted. Every time you don't wear a mask, every time you don't social distance, every time you go and you hang out with groups of people and you are not practicing what the CDC tells you, you are causing an incident. What has happened, the numbers are starting to come in from Thanksgiving, where people have gathered. There was a million people or more that traveled. We're in the middle of a crisis. The only way we're going to get through this if people pay attention. And it's costing jobs. People are hurting. And it's because nobody wants to inconvenience themselves by wearing a mask and socially distance. I'm sorry I'm on a bit of a tirade, but I'm telling you, we see this every day. We talk about it every day. And we're trying to keep the economy going, trying to keep Long Island moving forward. But without everybody participating, without everybody doing their part, we're never going to get out of this.
John, what do we do about that? Because we're talking about people's personal behavior. I had the guy that cuts my hair, for example, told me, he said, oh, yeah, I'm going to have 19 people over at Thanksgiving. He said, I don't think the police are going to come in. They're not going to come into somebody's personal house. But I mean, he's wearing a mask while he's cutting my hair. He knows what it is. What do we do about this?
People have to take responsibility. People have to take self-responsibility. Years ago, people didn't want to wear, I'm showing my age, seatbelts. Okay? And it took a while. It took a knowledge of people unfortunately dying because they wouldn't wear a seatbelt. Well, it's the same thing here. And people pounding their chest, you're infringing upon my rights. You have a right. You want to die, die. But you don't have a right to get me sick, my kids sick, or my grandchildren sick. So wear a goddamn mask.
I think it's going to make a difference. The guy at the top setting an example. I think we learned a lot about that it makes a difference what the president does and says.
I think so. And I'm sorry to go on this, but we can't get our economy going. We can't get people back to work if we don't get this COVID-19 under control. Because if we shut down, if the schools are shut down, if businesses are shut down, what is it going to do? We'll have a situation like 1929 all over. We'll have an economic collapse that is self-inflicted. So for those of you that are listening, talk to your friends, talk to your family members, put on a mask, be socially distanced, It stinks. Nobody wants to be stuck in their house. Everybody misses their families. But, it's better you miss your families than they come and view you laying there. It's somebody said to me, it's good to see you. I said, it's better to be seen than viewed.
Yeah, and the challenge in all this is we've got to do this. We've got to talk about wearing masks, acting socially responsible. At the same time, we also have to push for any number of programs. I mean, we're a labor movement with the same needs and concerns that we've always had about fair treatment for working people and decent wages and benefits and protections, and yet we still have to, we can't forget this aspect of what you spend every day working on.
Absolutely. And I just have to say, I'll never forget getting a report from the places in Georgia where they process pork and they process chicken and they process beef. And the employers put up saran wrap between the workers and said that would protect them. So OSHA protections, the government has to step in and help. So thankfully, the union stepped in and made sure that those workers were protected. But this is something the government has to do. The government has to step in along with the union and along with personal responsibility.
Right. And so, we're going to have our same set of priorities before us. And, Ryan, you may want to run through, now that we've gotten past the election, we've had these successes, what are we going to do? What are we looking for? What are we trying to accomplish?
I'm sitting here sort of quiet and keeping to myself because I find it exceptionally interesting that John used the same example as Corey Lewandowski about an individual personal responsibility with regard to seatbelts and mask safety. But the reality is that cuts to the core of the discussion here. It's not left, right. It's not Democrat or Republican. These are just obvious choices people have to make. And so whether you're a fan of Corey Lewandowski or a fan of John Durso, at the end of the day, it's just common sense if you want to keep your family safe to wear a mask. And so ultimately that drives it, what we fight for in terms of policy. We're fighting for the New York HEROES Act, which will put an infectious disease standard, PPE, staffing levels, and cleaning procedures in place in the private sector and give local government and state government the ability to play a role in keeping our workforce safe. And so that's something that we've spent some time fighting for, and we'll continue to do so until we can ensure that all working people are going to have the ability to go to work and come home with the expectation that they'll arrive home the same way they went in. And then facilitated child care enrollment. You guys have heard me speak about that a number of years prior to now. And so it was important before a pandemic. And the needs of workers generally when it comes to childcare have been exacerbated and highlighted as a result of the pandemic. So facilitated enrollment, without getting into the weeds because I don't want to put the audience to sleep, you got it, John. It really just supports people that want to go to work. It puts a cap on their out-of-pocket expenses and ensures that people are able to continue working, continue to be productive members of society, and continue to help our economy grow. And ultimately supports a lot of union childcare providers. And so it's really just an obvious common sense policy that's going to benefit the regional economy, the state economy, and really make sure working people are better off for it. And then, things that we always fight for are going to be our way out of this pandemic, and that's infrastructure investment. Whether it's clean and renewable energy industries that need to come online in good and create good union jobs, or just traditional capital expenditures, expanding and reinvesting in infrastructure that's already in place. Those are some obvious areas where we know it's going to put people to work, it's going to build wealth within our communities, and just going to improve our economy as a whole. And so those are the type of things that we've always fought for, and those are the type of things that as a result of the pandemic we're going to fight even harder because we know working people are hurting, and these will help with that.
Well, I just have to comment. You mentioned about infrastructure. How lucky we are that we have a governor who has the foresight to invest in infrastructure. I mean, under Governor Cuomo, the infrastructure investment in this state has been just phenomenal. Whether we're talking about the third track, we're talking about LaGuardia Airport, we're talking about JFK, we're talking about the Moynihan Building, we're talking about all the projects that are being done here on the island. Because we are fortunate to have his leadership and his understanding that infrastructure is the key to our economy, the tax dollars, the working men and women, the families that are put to work, and then all of the different ancillary groups that are benefited by that. Without that leadership, our economy would be in just a terrible, terrible state. So, you talk about it and it's key. And, talk about infrastructure. Roger, I know that you are so involved with the green economy, green infrastructure. Talk to us about that.
Well, the governor, we were fortunate enough to spend about an hour with him on a call with union leaders, and he is just 100% in on trying to address climate change in a way that will be good for our New York economy, as well as actually solve some of these problems of the warming of our atmosphere. And his investments in infrastructure are going to be heavily weighted toward dealing with climate change. And for us here on Long Island, it's important in a couple of ways. I mean, first of all, the effects of climate change are going to be experienced here first and probably most drastically. We're on an island. We're surrounded by water. Climate change means rising sea levels. This means a loss of property. It means tremendous expenditure on the part of local communities to address the damage that's done when we have a major storm. So our investments in addressing it are important. His are critical. The second thing is that we're located in such a place where we're in the middle of the offshore wind industry, and we have a skilled workforce. So the investments that he's promised to make are going to make a big difference to us. We're going to be able to see these wind farms growing off our coast. We're
not actually going to see them.
Well, we'll see people leaving to go out and work on them.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's the main thing we want to see.
Right.
Both in the construction of those and in the operations and maintenance. So this is a big thing for us, and his investments. I'm just so happy that we don't have to sit around here in New York and debate whether climate change is real. Fortunately, and that's leadership. We've gotten past that, and we're moving on, and we're doing something about it. We're going to create jobs, union jobs, and we're going to help communities get into this industry that were never in it before.
Yeah, we're developing a whole new industry, and we're very fortunate, as you said, with the leadership of Governor Cuomo, but also under the leadership of Laura Curran and Steve Malone, two county executives who have the foresight about infrastructure, about the green economy, and about what we need about jobs. So we have a trifecta of good. I mean, look, nobody's perfect. We don't always agree with everybody. But in this instance, their foresight on investment in infrastructure, investment in the green economy is going to help establish the future of Long Island.
And it's very interesting that we're working with developers of major developers who are European, who have come to this country with the idea that they're going to support union labor. It's not totally divorced from their experience in their own countries, but oftentimes big developers come to the United States and say, hey, it's the Wild West. We can do whatever we want, and we can exploit workers and make money.
Well, we're not letting that happen here on Long Island. Between the Federation, the Nassau-Suffolk Building Trades, that partnership, and the elected officials here on the island, we will make sure that these things are done union and done by the very best tradesmen. Ryan, just quickly, because I know we're starting to run out of time, why don't you talk a little bit about some of our building our local support and how that works.
Yeah, so the pandemic, while a terrible thing generally, has given us an opportunity to work with our affiliates and figure out ways and to deliver value for them and their members. So, COVID-19 is ever present. It's something that affects every aspect of our lives. So working in partnership with Northwell Health, NICOSH, which is the New York Committee on Occupational Safety and Health, and our brothers and sisters in UAW Local 259, this Thursday we'll be holding a health and safety training that will cover the differences between COVID-19 and the flu. Two things that we've become intimately familiar with, but they're very similar. And so it's important to understand the differences. It's important to understand the implications and the impact that that's going to have on people's lives now and into the future. And so we'll continue to do educational trainings like this, working in partnership with the leaders of our locals, working in partnership with folks like Northwell Health and NICOSH to make sure that our members have everything they need in order to be safe and successful in accomplishing that for them and their families throughout the season. And so we've done a number of things like that. We've also had, things not as positive. The pandemic, as we mentioned in our last podcast, has brought out some of the worst in employers, and we've been thankful to have partners at the local level like Supervisor Romaine, Councilman LaGuarcio, Suffolk County Legislator Rudy Sunderman, all of which, as you pointed out, we work well with Republicans and Democrats alike. Everybody I just mentioned is a Republican elected official that demonstrated support for our brothers and sisters in UFCW Local 2013 when an employer by the name of Quality King failed to really set standards, protocols, any sort of safety procedures to make sure that folks could go to work and come home all in one piece. And so after an exceptionally high number of cases, there was a conflict between the local union and the employer. But we've been fortunate to be able to have the support of those elected officials. That's a dialogue that's ongoing. That's an issue that's still not resolved, but one that we'll continue to support the local with and make sure that the workers have the support that they need and deserve.
Thank you, Ryan. And we are committed to making Quality King do what's right by those workers. So, Roger, just quickly, you want to talk a little bit about the work that we do with Jobs with Justice and our community allies?
Yes, we are very committed to having a presence in the community, and we will be working with our ally Jobs with Justice this year to try to build a whole different kind of approach to economic development on Long Island. That we could probably do an entire segment just on this topic, but by bringing new people from the labor movement onto the board, we're going to set an agenda that reaches out to community partners and asks them to agree with us and fight for good jobs in local communities that benefit people who live in those communities. So it's really supporting the union model. And I think that we have made such good allies in other fights, working with religious leaders and community leaders who want to be active and want to be a strike force to fight for things that come up. And we're saying maybe in the new year we can find a way to take that same strike force and get them to work on these local issues that come up and before zoning boards, before town boards, before the IDA, and say, hey, we want you to stand behind us to support union jobs.
Well, I think that's so important. And, that's an opportunity. Maybe on our next podcast, we can bring some of our folks in from Jobs with Justice and talk about that a little bit. So I just want to say to everyone as we conclude that we wish you the very best for the holiday season, whether you celebrate Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, Christmas, or any of the many holidays that occur now. Enjoy the time with your families. Hold them a little bit closer this year as we go through this pandemic. We thank you for your support. If you're listening to this, and obviously you are, because otherwise you wouldn't hear what I'm saying, if you like what you hear, share it. If you don't like what you're hearing, tell us. Let us know. If you have a subject that you'd like to hear us talk about, let us know. This podcast is for our members, their affiliates, and the people of Long Island. We are proud to represent the men and women of the Long Island Federation of Labor, their families of the AFL-CIO. We are proud of the work that we do, but we are your voice, whether it be here in town halls or in county seat or in Albany or in Washington. This organization is here for you. Stay safe, wear a mask, socially distance. Like we told in kindergarten, wash your hands. But most importantly, love your family and be safe. This is the Long Island Fed News with John Durso, Roger Clayman, and our guest this week has been Ryan Stanton. It's a monthly podcast of the Long Island Federation of Labor, AFL-CIO.